Everyone, welcome. It's 3:10 to left, the hottest podcast on a railroad track. Tom Caron from NESN. We've got Alex Speier, the Boston Globe at Tropicana Field. And in the middle, the creamy filling. It got weird fast. Lou Merloni with us as he joins us for this edition. Sound like Triston Casas doing a radio walk-off interview, but we won't get to that. Lou, how are you today?
Oh, I'm doing well. I see that Alex is at beautiful St. Pete, and you're nestled back home, I'd imagine. So, no, things are good.
Lou, I've got to ask, like, when you see the Trop, like, how much do you think about the fight?
Yeah, I think about good hitting, number one, because back then they were the Devil Rays, right? Like, they weren't the Rays. The Rays can pitch. The Devil Rays can pitch. Good hitting, and for some reason competing for playoff spots while we fight for a team that's lost 100 games. Like, that's kind of what we did. I don't know why, but every single year, twice a year, we got into fights with these guys.
But it wasn't just fights. It was pitchers throwing at hitters, Trot Nixon throwing a bat at pitchers. I mean, it was always crazy stuff.
Yeah, well, Trot, the bat was loose a little bit. Like, he needed pine tar. That was by no means was that intentional at all when he threw the bat at the pitcher. I think one time, it was Tampa, the one up field with Fenway in front of Monster. Like, it actually got out there somehow. And, of course, I spent a beautiful night in the hospital down in St. Pete when Pedro threw that one-hitter, had a no-hitter going into the ninth with Gerald Williams when he charged the mound. So, very memorable. I don't remember much of that one. I have to watch the video again because I had a little concussion from that. But always entertaining playing the Devil Rays.
But the devil is gone, and it is just the Rays who deviled them now. Listen, I want to start with Joe Castiglione because the announcement came last week. We've all been talking about our memories of Joe. You have a very different perspective. While we've all been around him, you spent a lot of time in the booth with him, doing games with him, and you're from here, so you fully understand, his legacy and what he means to the people of New England. So, when you think of Joe Castiglione, what are your impressions? What are your first thoughts when you hear a guy like that is retiring after 42 years?
It's hard too because it's like he's like the voice of the Red Sox and has been, because it's literally on radio and it was pretty cool to meet him for the first time as a player because, as you mentioned, like being a kid growing up around here, just listening to the Red Sox on the radio was always Joe Castiglione, and when you get called to the big leagues, you're in this excitement phase and everything going on. Then all of a sudden, Joe Castiglione comes walking into the clubhouse. And you hear that voice and you meet him. So kind of to be a kid listening to him, to have a player, have him call, your hits. So I called my first at bat at Fenway Park. And then to later be able to work with him. I did the first game with him back in 2013. So it was an honor. It's pretty cool because I learned so much from him. I've talked to him. I'm still amazed by him, his memory and how he goes about his business, how much passion he still brings to the game, how much he cares about this team winning and losing. So it's a loss for us, but I'm really happy for Joe and Jan, his wife, to be able to just kind of slow down a little bit now and enjoy themselves. That's a long time. We always think about Castigs walking away from the game, but Jan's given an awful lot too, and kind of giving her husband to us, right, the game of baseball. So I'm really happy for him. Hall of Famer, 100%, and I'm looking forward to that last day at Fenway Park.
How much has he kind of nurtured, like been truly invested in seeing you get better as a broadcaster? And how would you describe the level of care that he has for what is going out in that game broadcast?
Yeah, I think well, the care, I think, is obvious because it's just, listen, I get up there, I like to think that I'm well prepared. And then, all of a sudden the game starts and he has some notes on these players that I don't know where the hell he got them from, right? And it's almost like it's history, right? It's just always like it's in his book. Like he just remembered things from 3 years ago or, his sister was a great volleyball player at UCLA. And it's like, okay, and so like that part of it is still amazing to me. He's helped me from day one. Like the minute I jumped in there and called games, like I said, in 13, I used to do like 25, 30 games a year on radio. And we talk a lot, after games about stuff, about how this went, how that went, how to be better at it. And then this year, when I do games with him, I started doing some play-by-play, and it was freaking awful. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, that's not my comfort zone. I don't know what I'm doing. So after games on those road trips, we would spend time, and he would talk to me about this, about that, about, you know, what he has seen. Because, you know, first off, I've never done it, so I don't mind being criticized. You're a former player. That's, you know, that's what we deal with, right? You're not swinging the bat well. We got to go fix it. So, no, he's been tremendous for me. I've been very lucky to have him around.
Do you remember interactions with him when you were playing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, when did that? Was it just afterwards that you really formed the bond with him, or was he a guy you talked to while you were playing?
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely formed it more, you know, now, right? Like, since I've been working with him every day. But I think, hey, you're aware of the broadcasters. You know what I mean? Like you are. You know, it's different now. I felt like, I don't know. We would watch tape of us. You know, it was just so different how these guys get information now. You know, because now I'll see a player that will actually he'll go back and look at his, you know, game tape or inning or at bat, and they have the NESN feed, so they're listening to the announcers talk about it. I think we had a little bit, but obviously it's so much better. They have so much more of it, so you're more aware of it. So for me as a player, it was just more of an honor just to have him around. You know what I mean? Like, same thing with Remy. Like, you know, I don't recall really kind of hanging out with them or really diving into the games of listening to them because you're playing, right? But it's just more of seeing them after the game, seeing them on the bus, seeing them on the plane, those sort of things. And for me, an appreciation of him just because, you know, obviously being local and knowing exactly who he is and what he's done.
Well, and that's actually why I asked. You kind of jumped to my point was, you know now you're doing a lot of games again, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
easy to coexist. You know what I mean? Like, you've got to call it like it is, and Joe does. I mean, you can hear it in his voice. You know, the pop up. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing more depressing than Joe calling a pop up in the bottom of the ninth with 2 outs at Fenway, because he bleeds for all of us. But there is a skill to the social interaction with the team. Jerry Remy did it as well as anybody. Right? He does it you don't spend 42 years with an organization without being able to connect with the fans over the airwaves, but be part of that group that is traveling on the team all season long. It's a skill, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not. It should always be in the back of your mind, right? But it really shouldn't, like, kind of affect what you say or how you see things. You know, I guess the good thing about being, like you said, that balance. I do think that he kind of walks that fine line. He is who he is. That's why he's great. 'Cause I think players can respect his opinion of it. I always felt like players look in the mirror. Like, if he started talking about me struggling at the plate, if I'm struggling at the plate, what's wrong? Like, he's right. But there is a balance, and he's walked it perfectly. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, been around. There's so much respect for that guy that I think you can kind of see it with the players.
So, on the subject of kind of calling it, calling what you see, and
Mm-hmm.
taking stock of things, 2024 Red Sox. We, obviously the farewell to Joe is going to be really very special, I think, for all of us over the course of the remainder of the season. But we also look forward to we also look at the present and the future of this Red Sox team. What are kind of the standouts in your mind of this team that the gravity of 500 has struck again? They've gotten pulled back there. How did we get here? Is this does this qualify as a disappointing? Does this qualify as disappointing given what the expectations were before the season, but then how they were recalibrated at the All-Star break?
Yeah, I think I answered this question the other day saying that it was a success, and really after the interview, I kind of took a step back and I'm like, big picture, it's not. Like, big picture, it's not at all, because, like, big picture, the Boston Red Sox should not be fighting for 500. Big picture, the Boston Red Sox should be in the postseason, right? So, but as you guys know, the reason I answer it that way is because of expectations. Like, I felt like everybody thought like this team was going to be exactly what they are, like a 500 team, in that area. So there were a lot of good things that happened. Obviously, I think that there were a lot of good young players. I think when I look at this rotation, more importantly, the future is really Bale, Houck, Crawford, right? Like this rotation. And those three guys have now built their foundation years. Like, this is it. Like, next year, we won't be talking about Crawford and Houck only throwing 110 innings, rather, the year before. We're going to say these three guys went out there and they're at 175, 180 innings, and there shouldn't be any concern whatsoever, after going through it this year and physically learning how to get through it and improving next year, that should be an issue. So that's huge for those guys. And obviously the position players, guys like Abreu, who is showing signs, and Duran, the year he's having is fantastic, and Rafaela showing signs, so there's youth in that lineup. Obviously Casas just coming back. So I would say it's a success only because of what my expectations were when the season started. You think about Jansen and Martin in your bullpen, and the other guys you've relied on have been all rookies or second-year players like Bernardino and Winkowski. But Weissert, Boozer, Slayton, Bailey Horn, like the list goes on and on with these rookies that you were just relying on, and it wasn't realistic. That's why nobody really had them in the playoffs. It wasn't realistic that this rotation with the inexperience could get through 162 of these. We're going to perform at a very high level to be competitive. Some of that has happened, obviously not enough. So in the development part of it, and of course you got the minor leagues where you had four guys kind of do really well in the minors and get to a AAA, which is huge. Now, as you know, like in the offseason, nobody wants to trade for A-ball players. They want AA, they want AAA, big league ready guys, if they chose to go that way. So it was a success based on expectations, and you said when things changed at the deadline or things changed at the All-Star break, that's the reason why it was a success, because these kids were playing at such a high level at that point. But 162 games is the real test.
So what do you think the Red Sox have to do this offseason in order to go from kind of the success relative to expectations to just what you've identified as the baseline of Red Sox success, which is like not trying to like find your way to 84, 85 wins, right? Like, and,
Yeah.
maybe with a very flat landscape, maybe we'll sneak it, but instead kind of being more in that, in that 90 plus wins territory, aiming for that. At some point they have to aim for like 90 plus wins, right? Like they want to aim to be a really good team. Where do you start that process? Do you go with, do you dive into free agent pitching with the guys like Snell and Burns? Do you focus on trade targets like Crochet? I'm assuming that it starts with the rotation, but you tell me, where do you go?
Yeah, it does. It starts with the rotation. And like you said, whether, you got to see with these, Snell, Burns, Fried is another one that I like, where they're at. Are they combination contract trades? I just think it's trades. I think you have too many lefties in this organization, not just in your big league team, but in your minor leagues. I think it's like you just mentioned one guy in Crochet who I would love here. And I know a lot of people wrongly kind of look at the trade deadline stuff that he was talking about and think it has anything to do with the offseason. Like, nobody wanted. I don't know why you would want Crochet at the deadline other than for 2025, right? You knew he was going to be shut down. You knew he was going to be skipped, or he was not going to be there for you in October. So nobody wanted him, and he came out with some demands, whatever. He has that year now that I was talking earlier about Houck and Crawford, that foundation year where next year he can just go. So he's definitely a guy you're interested in. Seattle, I mean, so at some point they got to realize you don't need five great pitchers, because you need offense to go with. It's the worst offense in baseball. Four great pitchers is good enough. Give up one of them. So I think that there's going to be some trades with the Red Sox. They need to get more right-handed. They need to get a couple big right-handed bats. And to me, they have to get a stuffed lefty, like a legit lefty coming out of the bullpen. Bernardino, Boozer, Horn. I get it. Maybe there's some more stuff with Boozer, maybe Horn too, fastball, but they're location guys. So I need a shutdown lefty in the bullpen. I need a horse starter to put on top of those other three guys, and I need two right-handed bats.
Is that all? When you look at that, but right? I mean, so it's funny because we talk about, is this year a step in the right direction? Okay, the obvious answer is, well, the bumper crop of prospects are that much closer. So no matter what, we knew the franchise would be in a better place by 25 than it was going into 23, right? Those
Yep.
single-A to double-A prospects are now double-A to triple-A, right? Roman Anthony and Kyle Teal, they're all knocking on the door now. Okay, that's fine. But as far as what this season was, like, I felt better about the bullpen after last year because you knew Kenley Jansen and Chris Martin were coming back to anchor the back end next year. They're both free agents, and they didn't come off the years they did a year ago. Like, in addition to adding that right-handed power and the starting rotation help, I don't know if it's a rebuild, but you've got to do some serious work on that bullpen now, too, don't you? I'm not sure I felt that way a year ago.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's still some intriguing arms down there that we've seen. Obviously, it's finishing rough for some of them, but Slayton, and there's a reason why they give Kelly, the ball all the time. I mean, because quite frankly, he might have the best stuff on the entire staff. He just can't locate, and he just can't execute when he needs to, and he pays the price because of it. But Hendricks coming back. Where does he fit? And then that lefty that just kind of jumps out at me is like that kid Tanner Scott. Like, that's a guy that can close, right? So, or be an eighth inning guy if Hendricks comes back healthy. So you got to rebuild it. And as much as I love what Martin and Jansen have done, like, it was sort of like that's kind of money off the books. Like, I think a lot of people are sitting there saying, you bring these guys back, you're going to lose them both. And now I think Martin, he's dealing with a lot of injuries here off and on this year. Same thing with Kenley. So I think it's, but you have to rebuild it. And I think Hendricks plays a role in that as well. But there's some arms there. It's just they should be depth arms, maybe, and not like seventh and eighth inning arms. But Slayton has been fantastic, too.
And a guy that, on the offensive side, that to me, the decision that'll be intriguing is Masataka Yoshida, right? The guy is hit, but Alex Cora's made it clear they do not view him as an outfielder. And with Roman Anthony on the way, they've got enough outfielders. So can Masataka Yoshida be a designated hitter for this team, or do you think they'll have to move him and try to use that spot to bring in some of that right-handed power?
I think it depends of who and how they're able to trade, right? Because there is a scenario out there that, and I know I saw that Ken Rosenthal piece, right, about Casas. What if Casas and Abreu were dealt for a huge arm, and you move on from Yoshida? Now you only have two lefties, so I'm just saying, like, there is a place that for him. I do think ideally, with some of the lefties and the young arms, young bats that you do have, I do think you'd like to have more right-handed bats. But I just think depending on trades and what ends up going down, I think there's a chance you may need a left-handed bat. But obviously his lack of versatility hurts you. He's still a good hitter. And if you get two right-handed and you can put a guy in hitting seventh, or sixth or seventh that hits 285 with 12 to 15 homers, I think you don't mind it that much. But it gives you more flexibility if you're able to move on from him. But how much money are you going to have to eat?
Do you consider trading Triston Casas? Picking up on that Rosenthal idea, or do you view him as future middle of the order fixture?
You're probably talking to the wrong guy, because I think I would trade anybody. I would move on from anybody, and I do think that's a discussion. I do think that moving on from Casas again, you need two things. You need to either trade for a big right-handed bat, although there's a couple very intriguing free agents, and you need a horse starter. And I don't know how you do that without giving up legit pieces. And that's where I was talking about guys like Casas, and obviously he's not swinging it well. And guys, somebody like Abreu, if you really believe Anthony, Roman Anthony is the guy. Maybe he needs a month or two, and you make some trades. You have to give up somebody that hurts. It's going to be an intriguing offseason. They got some huge decisions to make, including the prospects that they have. Do they move any of those? Do they move big leaguers? I think everything is on the table right now. Absolutely everything. And if there's a team out there, if Seattle is sitting there saying, we're going to give you Gilbert or Miller or somebody like this, and it comes down to that, then I think you go all in. I'm just one of those guys. I don't really care who you trade away. I care about who you get back. Like, who you trade away means nothing to me. Like, I know you don't want to trade away Mookie Betts. I get it. The problem wasn't trading Mookie. The problem was what you got back. You know what I'm saying? Like, the problem wasn't trading Hanley Ramirez, who won, runner-up to MVP, Rookie of the Year, Silver Slugger, All-Star. The good part was that you got Beckett and Lowell back. So there's good trades, right, for both teams. Like, if you trade Casas to Seattle for one of those stud pitchers and they're both great players, you win. because you got your starter who turned out to be a great player. They win too. So I just care about who you get back. I don't care who you trade.
I'm going to throw out one tangent that since we spent a lot of time thinking about the Seattle pitchers, sometime really dig in on the home road splits of all of those Seattle pitchers. There is something that is insane about pitching in Seattle that completely distorts, like a funhouse mirror, the performance of every player who walks through there. You hit a ball in the air in Seattle and it acts unlike anything else in Major League Baseball, to the point where I really don't know if Logan Gilbert is the elite pitcher that we think he is, because if you look at his road numbers, he's been getting smoked. That's a separate, that's, just kind of a something I've been digging in on a little bit more. I am a Cy Young voter this year. I haven't, I'm really wrestling with how that impacts some of my thinking. But separate from that, Ceddanne Rafaela is another guy who is like an absolutely, like, what is he? He's like, there are extraordinary gifts there, right? Like, we've seen some amazing games, several of the best games that any Red Sox player has had this year. Certainly many of the most spectacular plays. We've also seen him, crush balls over the monster. At the same time, the approach is wild. This is you were teammates with Nomar Garciaparra coming up, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's too aggressive." He barreled everything that he was swinging at. That's not been Ceddanne Rafaela. What is Ceddanne like? Is he an everyday big leaguer to you? And if so, how does that work?
Yeah, I think he is, because of what he can bring you defensively. At some point we have to stop about poor defense and how bad this defense is if all we're going to do is talk about offensive numbers. Like, I feel like if you're going to just sit there and say, I want the best offensive player to constantly play, but continue to be upset that the team is bad defensively, then you should just not be able to allow it in the discussion, because you need good defensive players. Okay. And that's exactly what he is. He's elite. So if he's in center field hitting 250, sitting in that 9-hole, popping 15 or 16 home runs, you pat him on the back and say, thank you very much. Because, and that's where Trevor Story comes into play. Again, another guy that everyone's like, Story's back. Yeah, but he can't hit. You're losing the point here, people. Like, he can play defense. You have the worst defensive team in baseball the last 2 years. I am tired of it, of watching these guys get unearned runs and lose ball games because of it. So if you have two elite defenders up the middle who play at a very high level, like, that wins baseball games, right? So it's not their job to put a monster bat on each side of them, or whatever it is. It's like, you fill the lineup. I do what I do exceptionally well. And I think that's what Rafaela is. I don't know what he is offensively. I think there's some adjustments obviously needs to be made. But he is a Gold Glove defender in center field, which is probably where he will be, where he should be. You have Duran in left, another Gold Glove caliber left fielder. You got a Gold Glove caliber shortstop. Go find some thump in right field and figure out who's playing second base, and please let them catch the baseball. You may win more games.
And as we stand at attention, the anthem playing behind Alex. It's almost game time. I've got a question for you, Lou. No, we can't talk. You got to mute that because I feel awful talking over it. Lou, I want to ask you about, like, I remember years ago somebody saying the middle class is getting squeezed out of baseball, right? You got superstars making exorbitant sums, and you got a lot of young players. And teams balance the checkbook, right, by augmenting the big contract with the minimum wage. You were kind of a glue guy. You were a culture guy at the end of your career, right? Rob Refsnyder maybe represents that a little bit on this team, right? But there isn't a lot of that. And if you're going to go back, if you're going to run it back over the last 20 years, they had that kind of, Ortiz to Pedroia to Bogarts. Well, it got cut somewhere along the lines, right? And trying to rebuild it with a lot of young guys. Trevor Story was going to be part of the answer to that. He hasn't been on the field, right? It's hard to be a leader if you're not there. Now he's back. Are they missing that? Do they need to kind of add, does that have to be part of the equation? We're talking about a lot of young players adding talent to the next couple of years of Red Sox baseball. What about the culture? How do you rebuild that? And do you got to make sure you got some guys who have a little bit of experience? Johnny Gomes ain't walking through that door, but guys like that have played important roles on teams over the years. I feel like they've kind of lost that a little bit over the last few years.
Yeah, well, it's actually kind of been filled with that. It's like what they're really missing is David Ortiz. They have enough Johnny Gomeses. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like the Rob Refschneiders, the Tyler O'Neills, the Adam Duvalls, the Hunter Renfros. It's like, that's awesome. But where the hell are the Pedroias and Ortizes? I mean, that's the problem. So, when we start talking about trades and bringing guys in and a guy's name like Alex Bregman comes popping up, you know what I mean? You're like, culture, hello. Like the guy comes in right away and it's like, this is how you win. That's what's missing. Not enough guys know how to win or have the cachet or have the careers, whether it's a starting pitcher and, who's come in here before and is like a horse. And I know we're talking about a lot of young starters, but, this is where you get into the free agency part of it. This is where you get into the Corbin Burnses of the world, and the Freeds of the world. This is where you get into the Bregmans of the world or the Willie Adameses or the Teoscar Hernandezes. And it's just like, okay. These are guys that have been there before. That's what's missing. Now you're still missing that star, and maybe you have them in Duran and Devers, but the stars have been what's missing, and you got to find that out because if you're waiting for this young group to become that, that's still 3 or 4 years away, right? Not every rookie comes in here and is a Gunder Henderson like that. They could be Jackson Holiday, right? So you got to go out there this offseason, I think, and get some veteran presence that have done this before.
Well, and to that point, I couldn't agree more. To that point, right? Show me. I mean, you still got to show me what Baltimore is going to do in the playoffs before I believe those young guys are doing that, right? I think there's a reason the Red Sox have been awful in August into September over the last couple of years, right? It catches up to young teams, right? If you don't have that horse, if you don't have that guy with a winning pedigree, if you don't have a guy you can shut the door and tell everybody, listen, this is what we got to do here over the last 6 weeks. They don't have that guy right now. It's not Devers. We know that. It's just not in his DNA. He might do it on the field, but he doesn't do it. He's not that kind of guy.
Yeah, and I think I look at the last 3 years, that's a big storyline now. It's like differently. I felt like 3 years ago was like the last dance. You know what I mean? And the veterans saw kind of what happened at the deadline, and they're like, our front office doesn't believe in us, and it just sort of lost. They lost their momentum, and they're like, whatever. And then there were some injuries. Last year, obviously the Duran Casas injury, but I just felt like it was paper thin. Like you're watching Paxton, and everybody and their brother was like, you ain't keeping this up, right? And relying on Sale, and it was just thin. They got Luis Arias. So it's like this year, I think it is about youth and experience. This year I think it was about position players like, wow, so dog days of August, huh? Like, okay, like that's a thing. That's real, huh? Like these starters. Holy smokes, I can handle 130 innings, but 150, 160, whew, I'm starting to feel it a little bit. So this was about youth. And next year, hopefully this is what I get into again, like Crawford and Houck especially, like I got a base of 170 innings. Let's go. I can do this. Some of these young players, okay, I just played 150, 55. I can now look back and say, this is what I need to do to be stronger at the end of the year, mentally, physically. All those things. That was a good foundation year for a lot of that. But you need to bring in dudes that are like, yeah, August, let's go. September, vamonos. You know what I mean? Let's do this. This is what I was built for, and not dying down the stretch.
Well, it's like a podcast. 30 minutes is easy, but you can't vamonos. You got to be Jared Carabas to do 2 hours. We're not going to do that. So we're going to wrap it up here. Lou, good stuff. We appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Alex, thank you for getting them to stop singing the anthem so we could wrap up our podcast. That's kind of power you have.
Well, we had Guns N' Roses following up the anthem. I don't know what that says about exactly the dynamics inside the truck, but here we are.
Yeah, Southwest Florida.
All right, boys.
Lou,
thank you.
Good stuff. We appreciate the visit. Thanks, man. That's Lou Merloni with Alex Speier and me. That's another edition of the 3 to the Left podcast. We'll see you again next time. Thanks for joining us.